Hey everyone, it's Skiesti. Mercy's settings were updated yet again, and since she has so many, it can be confusing to know what each of them does and what you should use. All of my Mercy settings that you see here are optimized for what I feel gives the most control and versatility over Mercy's movement. Any of Mercy's settings that restrict control over movement or require additional steps or have small hindrances are ones you shouldn't be using unless there's some reason you absolutely have to. My sensitivity is 1600 DPI and 25 in-game, which is, of course, on the higher end. This isn't necessary, but with Mercy, I find having a higher sensitivity is better as you can look around much quicker. The only difference in my key bindings from Mercy's default key bindings are: Crouch is double bound to left control and a side mouse button, Damage Boost is bound to primary fire, and Healing is bound to secondary fire, and Quick Melee is V. I highly recommend my settings, minus the Beam and Guardian Angel sensitivity, which I'll discuss later on, but if they don't work for you, feel free to try out her other settings, which I'll explain now. Toggle beam connection is off by default, which means you have to continuously hold down either of your primary or secondary buttons to heal or damage boost, otherwise the beam will disconnect. When toggle beam connection is on, you only have to press those buttons once, and then, even if you let go, your beam will stay connected. I recommend not using beam connection on because to disconnect your beam, you have to either look away and click a button to disconnect, melee, leave beam range, or weapon swap, and it's really just annoying. In addition, when beam connection is off, you're able to swap endlessly between Mercy's beams while holding one of them down. When it's on, however, the beam will get stuck on healing. Now that might not seem like a big deal, but holding damage boost down and tapping heal when necessary is a technique that highly increases your damage boost uptime. Another difference is if an ally dies. With off, your beam will automatically go to the next available target, whereas with on, your beam will just stop. Now with all that said, most Mercy players that use toggle beam connection on do so to reduce fatigue when playing for long periods of time. If that, or other things related to that, aren't concerns for you, you really should have this setting off. Caduceus Blaster input determines what button triggers the Caduceus Blaster. By default, this is Match Healing Beam, which means the Caduceus Blaster will be fired when using the same binding as the Healing Beam. The other options for this setting are Match Damage Boost, which will fire the blaster from the Damage Boost bind, and Match Both, which allows the blaster to be fired by pressing the same binding as either the Healing or Damage Boost beams. I play with Damage Boost bound to mouse 1 and Healing bound to mouse 2. Before this setting, I would have to fire the pistol with mouse 2. Now I use Match Both so that when I swap from the staff to pistol, I can fire from either mouse button. Toggle Guardian Angel is on by default, which means you'll tap once to fly and tap again to stop. When this setting is off, you'll hold down Guardian Angel and let go when you want to stop. Both Toggle Guardian Angel settings will activate immediately when a valid target is found, allowing you to hold down Guardian Angel the moment someone comes into your line of sight and have it trigger. Having this setting on won't allow you to chain Guardian Angel, meaning if you fly to someone and hold down the ability, you won't automatically fly again once it's ready. If you want to chain Guardian Angel, you have to let go of the button, then press it again. This does not happen when the setting is off. Guardian Angel target priority has 3 different options that vastly change the way Mercy's flight works. By default, this is set to prefer beam targets. With this, you'll always fly to the ally your beam is on, no matter where you're looking or if there are pieces of the environment in the way. You really shouldn't be using this setting because you'll have to disconnect your beam to fly to someone that isn't your beam target. This will end up reducing your beam time and feel generally yucky to play with. Next, facing target only allows you to fly to whoever you're looking at regardless of who your beam is on. The major downside to this option is not being able to Guardian Angel if your beam is on someone but you're not looking at anyone. You will always require line of sight on an ally to activate your flight. Saving the best for last, Prefer Facing Target combines the strengths of the two previous options by allowing you to fly to either your beam target if you're not looking at anyone, or fly to who you're looking at even if you have your beam on someone else. There is pretty much absolutely no reason you shouldn't use this setting. The only thing you'll have to be a bit more mindful of is Guardian Angel's range and targeting. If you fly to someone that's just slightly out of beam range, or aren't looking close enough to your target to activate Guardian Angel while your beam is on someone else, you'll be brought back to your beam target. With Prefer Beam Target, your flights are much more fluid and you have so much more control over your movement. If you're not using this setting, you're severely limiting yourself in what Guardian Angel is capable of doing. Toggle Angelic Descent is off by default, meaning, similarly to Toggle Guardian Angel, you'll hold down to trigger Angelic Descent and let go when you want to stop. With this setting on, you'll tap once to trigger Angelic Descent and again to stop. I don't know why anyone would ever want to use Toggle Angelic Descent on, and in my opinion, you really shouldn't. I played around with it for a few minutes and it just felt really gross and took away from my control and reactivity. Crouch activates Angelic Descent is on by default and does exactly what you think it would. It allows Angelic Descent to be activated by either crouch or jump. With this setting off, Angelic Descent will only be triggered by jump. If you play with Toggle Crouch on, you want this setting off, or else, when you super jump, you'll descend very slowly since Angelic Descent will activate. I have Crouch activates Angelic Descent on, so I have more options to trigger Angelic Descent, which, to me, feels more fluid rather than being restricted to triggering with only jump. For the controller users out there, Secondary Fire activates Angelic Descent on Gamepad is on by default. If you're on console or using a controller, you have the additional option to trigger Angelic Descent by pressing Secondary Fire. Obviously, with this setting off, Angelic Descent won't trigger with Secondary Fire, leaving it bound to just jump and crouch. Now, everyone knows I'm not a controller user, so I asked Adriatic, who assisted us with the console Mercy guide in the past, to help me out with testing and explaining this particular setting. They told me players who use a default layout and use their left trigger button to Angelic Descent will want to keep this on. On the other hand, players who don't use the default layout will see no difference if it's on or off. Automatically toggle Angelic Descent after Guardian Angel basically explains itself. By default, it's off, which won't automatically trigger Angelic Descent after you Guardian Angel, and you should really keep it that way. If you turn it on, Angelic Descent will automatically trigger after performing a Guardian Angel. Angelic Descent will always trigger with Jump Guardian Angels. However, for Crouch Guardian Angels, Angelic Descent has a chance not to activate if the buttons are pressed quickly. Rise during Valkyrie with ability 3 is off by default, meaning you'll only be able to rise in Valkyrie by pressing Jump. With this on, you'll be able to rise in Valkyrie by pressing either Jump or Ability 3, which is whatever your ultimate is bound to. This setting is off for me, as I don't feel having it on is necessary, but if you'd like an additional option to rise during Valkyrie, there's no harm in having it on. Relative Caduceus Blast Aim Sensitivity is the setting we asked for a long time, and allows Mercy's staff and pistol to have separate sensitivities. By default, the sensitivity is 100, which means it's the same as the staff sensitivity. As you lower the sensitivity, the pistol will be that percentage of sensitivity of the staff. For example, setting this to 25 like I do results in the pistol being a quarter of the staff sensitivity. If you wanted, you could technically make your pistol more sensitive than your staff, since the max sensitivity is 500. There's no reason to do that, but if you really want to, then, be my guest. If you have a lower sensitivity, you might not feel the need to change this setting at all. However, if you play with higher sensitivity, I definitely recommend turning this setting down so your aim is more accurate. Keep in mind, swapping from one to another with such a drastic difference in sensitivity will be a bit of an adjustment. Beam sensitivity is set to 100 by default. The lower beam sensitivity is, the closer your crosshair has to be to your target to activate the beam. On the other hand, if the sensitivity is higher, your crosshair can be much further away. If you have trouble swapping your beam from ally to ally when they're playing close to one another, you most likely have this setting too high. Guardian Angel sensitivity is 100 by default. It works the same as beam sensitivity, so the lower Guardian Angel sensitivity is, the closer your crosshair has to be to your target to trigger flight. If the sensitivity is higher, your crosshair can be further away. Don't put this setting too low or too high. If it's too low, it'll be a pain trying to line your crosshair up accurately for every flight. If it's too high, you'll have a hard time flying to specific teammates when they're close together. And that's all for me for now. I know it's been a while since I've uploaded, and I am so sorry for that. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or concerns about Mercy's settings, or if this was helpful for you. It would also help me out a lot since it's been a while since I've posted. Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you so much for watching as always, and I will see you next time. Wait,